with lawmakers rushing to extend the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act before it expires at the end of the year. A new study finding how much money President Trump's signature tax bill has really saved Americans. Filers earning between $50,000 to $75,000 saved more than $4,500. Those who made up to $100,000 saved nearly $6,000. Those who made up to $200,000 saved nearly $10,000. Now, Republicans are still considering how to pay for this. One plan being considered would roll back the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid expansion for the working poor. A group of 12 House Republicans sending a letter to Speaker Johnson warning they will not vote for a reconciliation package that includes steep Medicaid cuts impacting vulnerable populations. I want to bring in Georgia Congressman Austin Scott. Congressman, here is what White House Deputy Chief of Staff James Blair told Fox News last night. Watch this.
I think that we are going to have the biggest tax cut package in history, not only renewing the president's 2017 tax cuts, but also adding some additional tax cuts on top of that the president campaigned on that are really great for middle and working class individuals. These are things like no tax on tips, right? No tax on Social Security. So that's what we're really working towards. We also have wide agreement on securing the border, make sure it's funded for the long term to ensure that the great work we've done so far extends past the next few months.
So, Congressman, the White House seems very confident they're going to get this one big, beautiful bill, despite a lot of different comments coming from some of your colleagues in the House.
Yeah, well, let's talk about what Medicaid and FMAP is, and the intentional confusion here from the left. So, FMAP is the federal medical assistance percentage, and it ranges from 50% in the country to 76.9%. Now, when the Dems expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, they made that percentage match 90-10. So the federal government is paying 90% of the Medicaid expansion. And so what we have talked about is moving that 90% level of the expansion back towards the more traditional levels of 50 to approximately 80% instead of the 90-10, 90% being federal, 10% being state match. That's what we've talked about. And nobody would be kicked off of Medicaid as long as the governors decided that they wanted to continue to fund the program. And so we are going to ask the states to pick up and pay some additional percentage of the Medicaid percentage, more than the 10%. And it's amazing. You would think that these liberal governors around the country would be jumping at the bit to and offering to pay more than 10% if they thought the program was important. But we have talked about changing that formula in Medicaid expansion that the Democrats did, which is 90% Fed, 10% state, to more closely aligned with what the traditional match is, which ranges between 50% for wealthy states and about 75% for some of the lower income states.
No, and I appreciate the clarification, because, you know, when you hear that Medicaid's being targeted in a general sense, I agree with you that we need to. Thank you for telling us that those discussions are actually underway.
They've said Medicare, they've said Social Security. Those are both bold-faced lies, and now they're absolutely misrepresenting the Medicaid scenario. We are going to ask the states to pay a larger percentage of the Medicaid.
Of the Medicaid, yeah. Okay, well, no, that makes a lot of sense. Now, but there's the other side of this, too, and this is where how are we going to get to the end here? President Trump and Republican lawmakers are considering raising the corporate tax rate, creating a 40% tax bracket for millionaires to pay for all of Trump's desired tax cuts. Here is what Pennsylvania Congressman Dan Muser told me on the program last week. Watch.
The Tax Cut and Jobs Act under President Trump brought it to 37 just for those, just on income levels over $750,000, I think it is. So by bringing it from the 37, as we're redoing the tax plan, to perhaps 38.6, right? It would still be 1% less than it was before. Right? So if you were to bring it up at one point, it brings about $15 billion in revenues. So if it did come up to 39, it's almost $25 billion. The president is determined not to have a standard, and this is my view from what I based upon him, I'm not putting words in his mouth, a standard Republican-style budget. What he wants to see is something that is in the interest of all of America, middle-income America, small business.
Congressman, is Mr. Muser's idea something that you would support? Because, again, this has been floated from the White House.
Well, first of all, most of the people where I live, if they make that kind of money, it is through a Schedule S business, not through a W-2. So what I would tell you is the Schedule S rate and the Schedule C rate, so the corporate America rate and the small business rate, have to be relatively the same. And so my question would be, is he talking about Schedule S rates, or is he in the pass-through income, or is he talking about W-2 income? If it's W-2 income, then maybe you get there with that. But if it's pass-through income, the pass-through income for small businesses has to be the same as it is for corporate America, in my opinion. And so small business should not pay a higher tax burden than big business does. So that's where my question would come in. Are we talking about W-2 income, or are we talking about pass-through income from Schedule S businesses? It's going to be, there's some complex questions that have to be answered here. I assume that he's only talking about W-2 income, but I still think that, higher tax rates don't lead to higher tax revenue. You talk about how much money the Trump tax cuts saved the average American household, but it also generated tremendous sums for the federal government. The truth is we've had higher tax revenues than we've ever had in the history of the country. It's just that the Democrats have been on this spending spree, and so now we have a higher deficit than we've ever had, other than the COVID era crisis we were dealing with. So higher tax revenues than we've had in the history of the country, but we still have a $2 trillion deficit because of the fiscal irresponsibility of the Democratic Party.
I want to bring in Liz Peek into this conversation, but real quick, would you support leaving the corporate tax rate at 21%, or would you be open to it going higher? Because this is the big business
I think the Schedule
story.
S and the Schedule C rates have to be the same. So if raising the Schedule C rates 2 points allows me to keep the Schedule S rates in line with Schedule C, then that's a trade I would make. I think that if you have a significant delta between Schedule S rates and Schedule C rates, then you create a tremendous burden on your small business owners who are competing with the Wall Streets of the world. Schedule S and Schedule C need to be approximately the same rate.
Again, thank you for the clarification. Liz Peek's got a question for you.
Congressman, going back to the Medicaid issue, because this is becoming a pretty big factor in these negotiations, there was an article, I think, in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend about how many Republican congressmen had pretty big numbers of people on Medicaid in their districts. But from what you're saying, really the issue comes down to state versus federal apportionment of the costs. Is that a way of getting
100%.
around and appeasing those Republican congresspeople who are worried about their constituents? You're saying no one's going to be taken off the rolls. It simply is up to the governors of those states to make these changes. That seems like a pretty straightforward argument.
Yeah, and I think in states like Georgia that are well-run with a good governor, I think you would see my governor say, you know what, we will pay a little more to keep our people covered. And I think that where you see a poorly run state with liberals in charge, then they're going to create as much pain as they can. So I don't discount that if you get into a far left governor, that he would intentionally create the pain for people on Medicaid, when all he would have to do would be willing to increase his percentage of the FMAP. So would there be some reductions? That would be up to the governors. It would not be part of the legislation. But yes, you are correct. We are talking about the state governments paying a small percentage increase in their share of the Medicaid cost of their citizens. And now, keep in mind, the federal government is still going to be paying the lion's share of that budget.
Interesting. Okay, before you go, I do want to ask you about this. President Trump posted on Truth Social that he hopes that Russia and Ukraine could reach a peace deal this week. Congressman, because you worked on armed services, I do want to get your reaction to what we're seeing right now and where we are with Russia and Ukraine.
Yeah, well, I hope they can get to a peace deal too. Let me just say this: Russia is the aggressor here. Russia invaded Ukraine. I don't trust Vladimir Putin to do anything that he said he's going to do. If you look at what he said, yes, we have an agreement on the Black Sea and how we're going to handle the Black Sea. And just as soon as all of the restrictions on our economy and banking restrictions are turned back on, then we'll start complying with what we've negotiated in the deal. I don't trust Putin any further than I can throw him. I will tell you that, we should have enforced the sanctions when Biden was president. The Europeans should have stopped European banks from doing business in Russia. There's a lot of blame to go around here, but I do not expect Putin to agree to any peace deal.
Congressman Austin Scott, really great to have you on the program this morning. You made a lot of great points, and thank you for the clarification on a couple of issues. We are certainly watching these negotiations in Congress to see where we go. Thank you, sir.